Only in a car that's called an Aviator would it be this appropriate for it to start up and the animation across the two screens takes you soaring into the clouds. Now, if you like that little insight, there's many more coming up in this video and many of my future videos as well. So please hit the subscribe button. It helps out this channel a lot. Welcome everybody to the 2020 Lincoln Aviator Reserve. This car that I have with me is the 6-seater configuration of the midsize 3-row SUV, based on the same all-new platform as the Ford Explorer, where it was given quite a lot of good talking points. Here, the engine has gone from a transverse mounting to a longitudinal mounting, and with a rear-wheel drive biased platform setup. And although here in Canada you can only buy this Aviator as all-wheel drive, you can still feel some of that characteristics when you want to be a little bit of an idiot on icy roads that I have out here in Canmore, or when you look at the profile of this car. Now, interestingly, if you go onto the brochure for this vehicle, you can find a little excerpt that says rear-wheel drive is available for fleet vehicle access or customer retail order. So maybe that means if you so desperately want an Aviator with rear-wheel drive, you can get one. The engine in the Reserve is a twin-turbo 3-litre V6. It has 400 horsepower and 415 pound-feet of torque. And on this specific model, where I have pretty much every option box ticked, I have the dynamic handling package, which includes the air suspension. And with this Aviator, the driving feel and being behind the wheel and operating this vehicle is my favorite aspect to it. There's a lot that I like about driving this car, but quite a few issues come across when you spend some time behind the wheel of what I have this past week. It largely comes down to the materials and the build quality of this unit that I'm testing out. There's still quite a difference between this vehicle and the Ford Explorer. You know, we've got totally different designs in and out. We've got some exclusive technology in here. And if you still want to go searching for parts bin things like the door locks and really small switchgear like that, you'll find it, but it's minute. Much like the Corsair, I feel like Lincoln is now making their own vehicles. They now have their own distinct personality, but perhaps the Corsair that I drove just a couple weeks ago was screwed together just a little bit better, I suppose. So let's talk about what I like. As I mentioned, pretty much everything that goes along with the driving experience in this Aviator is very, very good. The engine has a great pull, and there's a hint of turbo lag, but really you have to be pushing this car hard to notice it. Great waft of power, and with the 10-speed automatic transmission that we have with this vehicle, it works very well in the background. You'll rarely notice it, only when the engine and the gearbox is cold, like a cold start that I had this morning. You'll notice a couple little jolts to the shift, but a rare thing to encounter in your day-to-day drive. This vehicle has the adaptive steering system that we've seen in quite a few of the other Ford and Lincoln products now. So when you get into this car or any of the new Ford products for the first time, it's going to feel a little bit odd when you go into a parking lot where the steering effort and weight changes drastically, but you will appreciate the system because it makes navigating through parking lots and any kind of tight drive-through situation incredibly easy. As I mentioned earlier, this vehicle has the air suspension as part of the dynamic handling package, and when you're driving along, you're really on one set height. There's only one way to change it, and that's to go through your drive modes into the deep conditions setting. Now, with this deep condition setting, it will raise the ground clearance by an extra 30 millimeters. So that's the only way to change the height of this air suspension yourself when you're driving. But when you're approaching the car, when it's locked, the air suspension will drop about 50 millimeters, kneeling down to the ground, making access into the cabin even easier if you're shorter. For someone my height, I actually wouldn't mind it staying at that fixed air suspension height. And you'll see in the video clips that I'm overlaying now how different of a look the Aviator gives when it's slammed down to the ground, especially on these 22-inch rims. So the ride with the air suspension is quite honestly flawless. You glide over any patch of pavement. Really, just the worst of road conditions will make this a tiny bit jittery, but on long highway drives, it's one of the easiest vehicles that I've driven recently. Here we've got the perfect position seats, which have 30-way adjustments, so getting the driving position that is perfection in your mind can happen. It just might take a few minutes to set up. Adding on to the fact that they're heated, cooled, and have massaging features makes this one of the best road tripping vehicles that I've come across recently. Visibility all round is very good, and road noise is hushed, not isolated like a lot of the German cars would be, but certainly quiet, no doubt about that. Talking about the exterior design of this Lincoln, I think it's perhaps the best to date. Love the way it looks. The 22-inch wheels really work here in this car, and because the air suspension is so good, I don't think there's much of a detriment to go for this larger wheel. You're going to notice a few interesting things. For one, the quad exhaust tips aren't real. They have the exhaust outlets pointing towards the ground, and the reason they'll do this is to keep them clean. If you ever drive your car for a while, you can see all that black soot kind of collects around the tailpipe, so that's what Lincoln has avoided trying to do this here. And we have the same door handle design, or I guess engineering setup, as the Continental, where you don't pull on the handle, you pull on a button behind the handle, and then when you're inside of the car, you have a button to open the door. Now, if your battery ever died, you still have a way into the car by using the key within the key fob, just where the Aviator nameplate is. But then the same story, if you're inside and for some reason this button failed, you still have a mechanical release to get out if need be. So for the driving experience, perhaps the best driving Lincoln I have experienced thus far. Refined, commanding, has a great amount of power, and it feels like a premium product from behind the wheel. But where this car is suffering, as I mentioned earlier, is the build quality and the materials. There's a bit too much going on of the leatherette in this car, which I thought was okay in the Corsair, but isn't okay in this car, just given the difference of price point. This is all fake leather and up here as well, and even though this cross brace might be real, you can see just how much flex there is pretty much anywhere that I try and rotate it. And then the screen as well doesn't feel like it's as rigid as it could be. I think that's a little bit disappointing in a vehicle that costs this much. But there are other aspects to the interior that I really like. The steering wheel that I talked about a lot in my Corsair review is utterly brilliant. The way that the climate control is all laid out is very clear, and almost all of the buttons feel crisp. The rotary wheel for your fan speed isn't put together as well as the volume and the tune knob up here. But there's plenty of storage throughout. You'll see that there's this hollow portion where you could hide away a handbag. A bit too much piano black plastic in this model. You'll see that it surrounds your seat controls right across the front of the dashboard. Down right in the center, the black plastic has what looks to be a grain built into it, and I just wish that could have carried over elsewhere, because it's something that doesn't look too bad here, but in comparison to all of the other piano black plastic that we have, in combination of the fake wood that's back further into the dashboard, all of these different materials and the way they feel, I don't think blend together as well as what they did in the Corsair with that one black plastic that had that rivet pattern within it. Another element of this Aviator is that it has the same 30-way adjustable seats that I have had a little bit of complaint to when it comes to how noisy they are. You probably can't hear it now, but I can tell you that with this seat that's beside me, it's rattling around a little bit, and it's a noise that wasn't present in the Corsair, and I think it is all coming down to this component that sort of holds up the back of your shoulders. I'm confident that if this portion was a one-piece setup like the Corsair, it would be a better built seat and it wouldn't vibrate and make that slightly annoying noise when someone isn't sitting in it. So as I'm 6'4", the front seat space is very good for someone my height. I wish the seat could go a touch lower. Personally, I think I have to duck down a little bit to, read traffic lights and so on, but really nothing too concerning. In this Aviator, we don't have the middle seat, as the center is kind of a command center, a little bit of storage as well. You got cup holders, you can move the sunshade forwards and backwards. And I really like here in this car how we have a built-in touchscreen that changes around the seat settings, audio settings. If you've got annoying kids, you can lock them out and not allow them to change around any of the settings. But I should say that the front passengers, they'll have a driver climate zone and a passenger climate zone, and then the second row will have their own climate zone, and then the third row will then have another independent climate zone. The middle row of seating is very good. I feel like I've got plenty of space back there to sit behind myself. The seats can recline a little bit and slide forwards and backwards if you don't need as much legroom. There's a couple of weird things going on here. If you want to access the third row from the middle seat, you've got to hope that they're up, because if they're locked down, the standard powered folding seats don't lift with just the force of your hand. You have to go into the trunk and touch the buttons to raise them. I don't know why you can't just lift them up, or why there's no button just behind the second row seats. I think that's a bit of an oversight. And the rear seats really are reserved for kids. If I try and sit behind myself, I really don't have much room, and my knees are at my ears, and they do feel quite hard as well. But as that covers really everything in the cabin of the Aviator, I don't think it's a car that lives up to the price point in terms of interior quality and the competitors that it's going up against. Even though I do think it is a good representation of the direction that Lincoln is going, it just needs, I think, a little more quality control and maybe some fancier materials to make it feel like the $87,000 car that it is. So with that, we're going to get out of the driver's seat now, park up, and I really want to move over to the Campus Paradise Index, where I can talk a little more about the trunk space and what it's like if you were ever going to sleep in the back of your Aviator. Alright, so this is part of the review where things get a little bit silly for my Campus Paradise Index. I kind of devised this test because a lot of the people in my group of friends were asking, if I bought this car, do you think I could sleep in the back of it? Is there enough space? So it's something that I've devised and want to continue doing when I get SUVs and wagons and hatchbacks and so on. Now, absolutely nobody, as far as I'm aware of, in my group of friends is going out to buy a $90,000 midsize SUV, but it's something that I'd like to continue to do anyway. So let's get this standard power tailgate up and find ourselves in the rear. Now, first thing I'm going to do is lower all of these seats. You have the buttons right here on the side, so I can quickly drop the third row with a touch of a button, but there's no way to drop the middle row from here. To do that, I have to go to the rear doors and pull on the handle. So I'm quickly going to do that now. And back around the other side. So that here, you can see we have a relatively flat floor. It rises a little bit from the third to the second row, but you do have quite a cavernous amount of space. Now, something that I want to quickly address with this Aviator, pretty much every vehicle that I come across in this SUV category that has air suspension has some kind of ability to squat the back end down, so that if you're loading heavy items into the car, you've got less movement to put them in and out, save your back a little bit. And that's something that's absent here from this Aviator, which I think's a little bit of a shame. I'm sure it could work here in this circumstance. It's just something that they haven't implemented. But back here you'll see we've got some tow hooks, some shopping bag holders, and even though this model I'm driving doesn't have a security cover, it looks like there's holes for it here and where the cover would slide up in here. Now if I open up this false floor, you'll see we've got a little bit more space, and if there was a security cover, I think it could fit in here. There seems to be some indents down on the side. Not really a lot of space back here. Maybe, you know, put some dog food and maybe that be it. You lift this portion up and you'll see you've got the spare wheel hiding underneath there. And let's collapse all of that. And even though the vehicle I'm testing out is the 6-seater configuration, if you ever wanted to cuddle up with your partner, it might make things a little bit difficult on that end. So maybe it would be best to have your head down here and your legs up here. So let's climb in and see what it's like for all 6'4" of me if I can lie down comfortably in the back of this Aviator. So climbing in back here, I can happily report that I have plenty of space. There's a little bit of a gap in between the third and the second row, but placing my hips behind, I'm confident that I can rest a lot of weight down on this third row. Doesn't feel weak at all in any of these places, and there's plenty of space here that I could throw down extra items if need be. Would this be much of a different story in the 7-seater configuration? I actually think it would be a little bit better, as we don't have this big hard plastic bit here in the middle. So if you're going along a big trip, but there's only 2 of you and you have the need to save some money, I think you could happily camp in the back of this car. There's a lot of space, and I feel like being back here wouldn't be too much of a challenge at all. And with this glass roof that we have in this model, if you're picking a starry night, I think it could be quite lovely back here. And so that concludes all of my thoughts towards the Lincoln Aviator. Overall, a car that I have enjoyed my time with, but I think it's quite a difficult choice in this segment to go with a vehicle like this, where the German competition is so established and have constantly been able to refine their products to very near excellence. So that's why I think that you should test drive this Aviator. The driving experience has been my absolute favorite part of this car. So that's where I'm going to leave it with this review and encourage you to test drive one, because if you like the way it drives and you can kind of let the materials inside slide past you, I think you will be very happy with owning this vehicle. So that's been everything from me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watching this video. Please like the video if you liked it, and share it if you think other people will like it too. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing to this channel, it does the world for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again here soon.